you really want to administer an antidote, the logical thing to do in organophosphate poisoning is to make the cholinesterase enzyme available again so that it can now metabolize acetylcholine and prevent it from accumulation. These rats have been poisoned. We'll wait 20 minutes before we give them atropine. Mr. Mohammed has noted the time and is setting the stopwatch. Look, these ones were poisoned, 4 of them. 2 are dead, 1 is in really bad shape. This one is in bad shape, these 2 are dead. This one is poisoned and received early treatment. 2 are dead, but 2 are good. So the outcome here is better than the outcome there. But the point I was trying to make before is that the true antidote for organophosphate poisoning will be a drug that will reactivate acetylcholinesterase enzyme. Because once the enzyme is reactivated, it will metabolize acetylcholine, it will prevent its accumulation, and it will prevent the exaggerated effect that results in toxicity and death. Please, if it doesn't make sense to you now, when you get to pick any book of pharmacology and read about irreversible anticholinesterases, of which organophosphates are typical examples. Now, the best cholinesterase reactivators we know are called the oximes, O-X-I-M-E-S. You must have come across this in the class. And the best example is pralidoxime. Orbidoxime is even like 1,000,000 times more effective than pralidoxime. Think back to your biochemistry. If the poisoning has taken place for some time, and the bonding between the organophosphate and the cholinesterase enzyme has taken place, remember, we call them irreversible anticholinesterases because the bonding between the organophosphate and the cholinesterase enzyme is very tight. Let's take a moment from the discourse and look at this last cage. These ones received the poison. We are waiting for 20 minutes to administer the antidote atropine, and already they are all showing signs of the toxicity. This one is dead. This one is quarter to, in fact dead, and these 2. You can see all of them, difficulty in breathing, tremors, convulsion, delayed treatment. Hello class, delayed treatment is almost equivalent to no treatment. That is the message for you in this class. I told you we had 4 objectives. First of all, we want to show toxicity due to organophosphate, and we've seen a spectrum. We know that the cause of death is usually respiratory failure. And all the rats that were poisoned, in all the groups, we saw more than 1 rat in a group. Even the ones that are not dead, showing signs of toxicity. It's the degree that varies. The second objective is to see whether there is a difference between female and male in their responses. And you can use, like I said earlier on, you can use the severity of the toxicity as a measure. You can also use the number of mortality. So here goes. For the female, so far, this is not the end of the practical. For the female so far, 1 out of 4 have died. For the male, 2 out of 4 have died. I should say 1 out of 4 has died, 2 out of 4 have died. So which one would you say toxicity was highest? I would say it's the male one. Look at this, look at this. That scratching of the mouth area is because is having difficulty in breathing. That is the way the rat expresses it. Toxicity is ongoing. Organophosphate poisoning, sniper poisoning, drinking snapper is a horrible way to die. Those who have survived have regretted taking it. Now, we said earlier on that the female animals and human beings, female, show greater response to a drug than the male. Why then do we have more males dying here, 2 out of 4, than in this female cage, 1 out of 4? There is a secret to it. Organophosphate belongs to a group of drugs we refer to as prodrug. A prodrug is not active in itself. It has to be metabolized or converted to the active drug. So organophosphates are not toxic in themselves. They have to be metabolized to the toxic drug that is actually the poison. And the ability of male rats and male human beings to metabolize drugs is greater than that of the female. So what has happened here is that these male rats have been more effective in converting the prodrug organophosphate from an inactive state into a highly toxic form that has resulted in greater toxicity and greater mortality in the male. Whereas in the female, because females have lower levels and activities of drug metabolizing enzymes, their ability to convert the prodrug organophosphate from an inactive state into the toxic form is lower than that of the male. So you expect lower toxicity in the female rats. Pharmacology is very logical. It makes a lot of sense. And that is why I keep telling students that it's not that pharmacology is difficult, you have to memorize. No! So long as your background in biochemistry and physiology is neat, you are good to go. Now let me tease your brain. Suppose it's not a prodrug. Suppose this was just a drug that will act directly to cause toxicity and mortality. Do you know what is going to happen? The female will succumb more. Because they are less able to metabolize drugs. Mind you, metabolism generally is an inactivation process. It's when you have a prodrug. When you have a prodrug, then the metabolic process will convert the prodrug into the active drug. We use the word generically, drug, right? So even the organophosphate, we are calling it drug. To convert the organophosphate, which is not active, to the toxic form, which is active. Very logical. Now look at animals in cage 2. These ones receive normal saline. No shaking. You can see there's nothing happening there. And in this cage that received early treatment, 2 are dead, but the other 2 are showing toxicity. Very mild form of toxicity compared to this one. You can see that one is almost going. When it's 20 minutes, please, your alarm will go off, right? Okay. Then you will inject the atropine for the delayed treatment. Earlier on, I posed the question, is it morally correct? Is it ethical for us to put, how many rats do we have here? 20 rats, and begin to poison them? Actually, over the decades, scientists are beginning to feel that it's not very ethical. But there is a conflict going on in their brains and in their minds and in their hearts. Because if we don't do animal experiments, then these things will happen in human beings. Still, we have taken care to make sure that we are as humane as possible when working with rats. So there is something called the 3 R's. R as per run. R as in Roland. And so on. The 3 R's. The first R is replacement. And it says, if you can replace animals with any other way of doing the experiment, please do so. And sometimes we can do that. We can replace animals with cell lines. We can replace animals with computer simulations. So as much as possible, we are encouraged to replace the use of animals. Watch this. Watch this. Tremors, convulsions, difficulty in breathing. This rat is gonna die. The question we are discussing is how ethical is it for Mohammed, encouraged by me, to poison this rat?
Keep rolling, please.
We are talking about the 3 R's. The first one is replacement. Do you know that the very fact that we are doing this virtual lab is because of our concern for animals and their use in experiments? If we do this virtual lab, the current class of students will access it. Next year, they will access it. Every year for the next 10 years, they can access the same practicals. If we don't do this virtual lab, every year, in the next 10 years, we'll be doing the same thing, poisoning rats. So we feel that by establishing a virtual lab, we have fulfilled the first R of animal ethics in research. Replacement. And that goes also into the second R. The second R is reduction. As much as possible, reduce the number of animals that you use in experiment. I can tell you that 20 years ago, if I were doing these experiments, I can have 10 rats in each cage because I feel, oh, it will be easy to calculate percentages. And the more animals you have, actually, and you take the average, in terms of onset and the toxicity they exhibit, the more accurate your result will be. But in line with the 3 R's, we've reduced the animals to 4 because we want to minimize the number of animals we use for research or for education, teaching purposes. The third R is refinement. Refinement deals with the suffering that we impose on these animals. If we finish these practicals and go away, these animals that have been poisoned, that have not died, they will continue to suffer through today, through tomorrow. They may not be able to eat, and eventually they may die. And the ethics of animal research dictates that you minimize that suffering. And some of the way of minimizing it is to let them have a speedy death. So we can use chloroform to first of all, anesthetize them, but let it be deep enough that they do not wake up at all. Well, we have to do this. So long as we don't do it too often, we hope that more lives will be saved. Because we hope that as nurses, future nurses or practicing nurses, you will get the message that early treatment is of paramount importance. Let's go back to the oximes. The oximes are cholinesterase reactivators. They will combine with the organophosphate, acetylcholine, nesterase enzyme complex and reactivate the enzyme. That's why they are called cholinesterase reactivators. And when they reactivate the enzyme will now metabolize acetylcholine, prevents its accumulation, stop all this exaggerated parasympathomimetic effects, and decrease the toxicity, maybe even prevent death. So in an ideal situation, antidotal therapy should be a combination of an oxime and atropine in vast doses to deal with the muscarinic effects that result in respiratory failure and early death. Hello? So what are we saying in effect? Is that atropine, in fact, if you look at the package inserts for sniper and most of these drugs, most of these organophosphate, they will tell you to have atropine handy in case poisoning occurs, so that that can be administered. I hope you know that if we gave this poison through the oral route, it will take a longer time for it to manifest in toxicity, which means the signs of toxicity will be delayed, mortality will be decreased. But in a laboratory setting, we want to demonstrate this effect as sharply as possible. The next time we repeat this experiment, we shall use chicks, 4-day-old crockers, all the way up to 10-day-old. And we give it orally. And you will see the same effect, in fact, in a more dramatic way. It's just that it's difficult to get chicks and eggs in Nigeria these days. Please, can we? 1 minute. It's 1 minute left. Then it's going to give the antidote here. And let me tell you in advance, because there's a limited time for us to do these practicals. I can tell you that the animals that will receive the antidote late, usually they are not better off than the animals that do not receive antidote at all. That is group 3 and group 5. In fact, many times in class, they are almost identical. We exaggerate it, but sometimes it's not exaggeration. Something happens to somebody in the village. They will first of all be thinking about other possibilities, like a wicked neighbor, or maybe some witches, before they want to come to town or to the health clinic, and then they will have problem with transportation, with raising the funds, to pay for card, to pay consultation fee, etc., etc. So there are many factors that result in delayed treatment. But sometimes it is ignorance. And it is that factor of ignorance we are trying for you to correct in your constituency, among the people you work with, among the people in your place of worship, among the people in your community. It's not all the time you will be meeting to discuss other things only. Let them recognize that you are a healthcare personnel, and then occasionally you gather everybody together with the approval or sanction of with the approval, yes, rather than sanction of the village head, and explain to them that immediately they should come to the hospital. And of course, you there should be familiar with the treatment to give. This group has just received the delayed treatment. This group that received early treatment, you can see that the 2 surviving ones are more alert and more normal when you compare them to the untreated ones, unpoisoned ones in group 2, than these ones that did not receive treatment at all. This one is in serious distress. I would like us to be rounding up this practical. Our first objective was to demonstrate the toxicity due to organophosphate poison. And we agreed that it is due to exaggerated acetylcholine, resulting from accumulation of acetylcholine, resulting from inactivation of acetylcholinesterase enzyme that would have metabolized the acetylcholine. Pharmacology is very logical. Objective number 1 met. Objective number 2, wanted to see if there is a sex difference in the response to the organophosphate. And we found here that the male had greater mortality and greater toxicity than the female. Mind you, the animals are few, they are only 4. So maybe you can say we are just lucky. But we've done this repeatedly with rats up to 10. It's because we are trying to follow the 3 R's. That is why we have used 4 today. And we have consistently seen that male rats or male mice or cockerels, which are male chicks, that are poisoned with organophosphate, respond more severely or have a worse outcome when you compare it to female. And there is a reason. I don't want you to, that sex difference we have seen is tied to a reason. The reason is that organophosphate, diclovos in particular, also known as sniper, is a prodrug. A prodrug is inactive on its own and has to be metabolized before it can become active or toxic. And in this instance, since male animals, including male rats, including male human beings, usually have a higher intensity of drug metabolizing enzymes or number and activity of drug metabolizing enzymes than the female, they are able to convert the prodrug organophosphate into the toxic form more. That is why you are saying, if it's not a case of poisoning, usually the greater effects are in the female. That's objective number 2. Objective number 3, we wanted to see if atropine can ameliorate or reduce or minimize or remove the toxicity due to organophosphate. And we can see that this cage, male rats, which were treated soon after poisoning with atropine, half the animals are good. 2 succumbed, 2 survived. If you compare it with the group, either male or female, well, better compared with the male, since we are trying to eliminate sex difference in this instance. You will see that this cage that received treatment is doing better than this cage. So although atropine is not a cholinesterase reactivator, because it antagonizes the muscarinic effects of acetylcholine, which account for most of its poisoning, it is an effective antidote. But it has to be given in vast doses, not the doses you will normally use for peptic ulcer disease, for instance, or for other disease conditions. Delayed treatment is a no-go area. They've just received their drug, their antidote, and yet 2 are dead again. Look at this one, ashed as a result of difficulty in breathing. So we expect this outcome to be bad and to be nearly as bad as the one that received no treatment at all. Prognosis in human beings also who do not receive immediate treatment is poorer than if they receive immediate treatment. And that's the generic message I want you to go home with. It's not about poisoning. Early treatment is always good for survival. Early treatment is always good for less toxicity. Early treatment is the best option. Take note of that, practice it, and teach it to others. As an aside in this practical, we've also been able to see how you can recognize a male rat and distinguish it from a female. If I set it down, it's easier. You can see the scrotal sac towards the beginning of the tail, the base of the tail. Look at this. This is a heavy one here. And this is completely lacking in female rats. Instead, if you have the opportunity to look, you can see this is a dead one. I want to pick a living one. You can see the breast line. You are not seeing that now. You know why? It's because we wanted you to see, so we did not put shavings on the cages and they have peed on the cages, right? And wetted them. So if not, you can see the dots, dotted line. You know animals have what we call the breast line in female, extending from top to bottom. You can see dogs, when they litter, they feed all the puppies, several breasts on one side. Actually, it exists also in humans. It's just that in humans, it disappears before birth. And then the female is left with only one breast on either side. I think this is a good point to stop the practical. You can ask questions. You can make comments online, and we do our best to get back to you to explain any difficulties you may have. I would suggest the following. You should understand the pharmacological basis of toxicity of organophosphate. 1, you should understand how atropine, even though it is not a cholinesterase reactivator, can serve as an antidote in organophosphate poisoning. You should appreciate what you expect to see as a result of organophosphate poisoning. And most importantly, you should appreciate that there is a huge difference between early treatment and delayed treatment, and that early treatment results in better prognosis. I think I will stop there. I will take time to look at your questions and your comments and do my best to correct wrong impressions and answer your questions as much as possible. So, Mr. Mohammed, thank you very much for assisting us with the practicals, and we look forward to the next edition. Thank you. Goodbye.